I'm Anthony Falco from AdNetZero, and I'm joined today by this amazing panel, and I'll ask you to introduce yourself. If we can start with you, maybe Jay.
Good morning. Yeah, I'm Jay Alschuler. I lead global media for MasterCard.
Audrey.
Hi everyone, I'm Audrey D'Antoni, co-founder at Impact Plus.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Dimitri. I'm a data analyst and sustainability lead at IAB Europe.
Thank you. We're here to talk to you today about the Global Media Sustainability Framework, the new release that's been released today, and why that's important to the industry. The panelists are going to share insights into how advertisers can estimate and plan the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions from media, driving efficiency and scaling sustainable practices. And we're also going to talk about how standardized calculation for emissions can help the industry to actively take steps towards being more sustainable. Now, I'm aware that many of you probably have never been near a media plan, and you probably don't know much about media budgets. Most of you probably are more concerned about the creative than where your ad is being placed. But I think it's really important that we all understand the emissions associated to the work that we do and the impact that we have as an industry. When you make a great campaign, that's just the start. You then need to work out where you're going to place that ad, where you're going to get to the right people in the best possible way. That might be a TV commercial, it might be a cinema ad, it might be an out-of-home campaign, or it might be a YouTube ad, or something else. And each of those has GHG emissions attached to it. Wherever you're going to display your piece of content has GHG emissions attached to it, and that's because they all use energy. For some advertisers, that's actually not a big deal. It maybe is a small part of their overall carbon footprint. But for others, according to the data that we've received as AdNetZero, it's actually a pretty big deal. It's actually up to maybe 35%. The advertising is up to 35%, and media represents a pretty big part of that. So it adds up. The global industry itself, the advertising industry, the media part of that, is estimated to be between 2 and 4% of global greenhouse gases, which is bigger than the airline industry for perspective. Some of us have started to calculate across the industry. We've started to work out what that measurement is, but we're all doing it in different ways. We're measuring in different ways, we're using different methodologies, and we're getting different results as a result of that. The calculations are different as a result. That's where the GMSF comes in. So the GMSF is built by AdNetZero with the help of the industry, and it's there to create a standardized methodology, a standardized way of calculating the emissions from media. It's consistent across channels to calculate the emissions more accurately and more transparently, and reduce the variance in those calculations, and ultimately to decarbonize the media plans of the industry. Importantly, the GMSF is built on climate science standards, so it aligns with current and future reporting requirements. And today, very importantly, we've released the new version of the GMSF playbook. In there are recognized boundaries or industry-approved boundaries for calculation and conceptual formulas for the 6 largest media channels by global ad spend. It's also included in there is the data guidance for digital, which makes the digital framework fully operational and ready to use for the industry. It's important to say that none of this would have been possible without the help of the industry, up until now we've had over 100 companies contribute to the work, as well as trade associations. We're very grateful for the time that they've voluntarily given us. So I'm going to hand over to the panel. I'm going to start with Dimitri. The new version of the GMSF playbook comes out today. IAB Europe and many of your members were massively involved, actually, with the development of that. Can you explain a little bit more about that digital framework and why it makes the framework operational?
Mm-hmm. So the Global Media Sustainability Framework covers a lot of different types of activity across the 6 channels. And in digital in particular, a lot of really complicated activity because of how the digital advertising ecosystem works, right? So when you're trying to build a framework for consistently estimating emissions, this naturally comes with a lot of questions about how precisely to do that. What the digital data guidance does now is kind of threefold, but the ultimate objective, as with the GMSF overall, of course, is to achieve comparable and equivalent environmental figures for all kinds of campaigns. Number one, it answers a lot of questions about how exactly to apply the digital formulae in the GMSF. questions like how to take into account the emissions of different devices, networks, etc. Number two, it allows users of the GMSF to apply it across various levels of data availability. So in the digital ad ecosystem, the data available to advertisers and other stakeholders will vary quite significantly. So we've enabled each stakeholder to use the GMSF depending on what kind of data they have available. And then finally, and here we need to be really thankful for our members that have helped a lot, it comes with a lot of data that is useful, both when applying the GMSF with your own inputs and also when your own inputs might be missing. So these are called default values, and they're used in cases where you might have an incomplete picture of your campaign and your digital activations. We provide this data through AdNetZero, and it's in the GMSF database in order to enable applications of the GMSF where the data you have might not suffice.
Thank you very much. And I think it's really important to say that the involvement of stakeholders, channel stakeholders in the development of the data guidance is really important, because you understand the realities, the operational realities of what's available, what can be done, what defaults can be put in place and make it actionable and practical for the industry. And so we'll be doing a similar thing with other trade associations and their members across the other channels as we create data guidance for those remaining channels. Jay, if I could come to you next, if that's okay. MasterCard are one of the global brands leading the way in calculating emissions from advertising and production, from media and production. How is that greater understanding of emissions informing your business decisions, and how are you engaging with your advertising partners? And is that leading to any sort of longer term strategies?
Yeah, let me start, I guess, with some broader frameworks for us of really how sustainability fits into our overall thinking and how we go to market. You know, if we take a step back, we realize that brand trust is at an all-time low. And, you know, we really think about that through also the lens of brand safety and figuring out the right context of how we show up to ensure that we are in the right places at the right time, reaching the right people. And so ultimately, when we thought about sustainability through that lens, we wanted to make sure that it was holistic and that it connected to our overall go-to-market, and it just wasn't an add-on and another step in the process. And so the way that we think about it is that ultimately our job is to ensure that we are in the right places. So we are maximizing brand safety. When you maximize brand safety, you're also maximizing attention. You want to make sure that you are reaching people when their eyes are on the screen, when they're paying the most attention. And so when you're in the most safe places, it tends to be the most premium, which also garners the most attention. As you start to generate more attention, your media and your communication becomes more efficient. When you do that, you actually need less frequency, less impressions. Less impressions means less carbon. So this is a way for us to think about how we are delivering the most efficient and effective way to go to market. And that's how we think about it. Then, you know, when we start to do all the calculations using this framework, having this shared language is so important. I would say that we were maybe on a little bit of the early side of exploring this. And you know, even 2.5 years ago, without this framework, everybody was using different calculations, there was different science. We operate in 110 different markets, and so you can imagine, you know, every market having a little bit of a different process. And so this has really helped us focus and create a shared language for the entire industry as we start to work with our media partners, work with our production partners. It's so helpful that now we have a shared framework and a shared language. And so, you know, what we've realized as we've gone about doing this is that as we start to maximize the efficiency and minimize our carbon, it's actually having a knock-on effect of ensuring that we are in the most contextually relevant places, the most premium places, and ultimately, you know, finding that it's having a brand positive net impact on our ability to drive trust and to drive impact with the consumers that we serve.
Thank you, Jay. Audrey, at Impact Plus, you help advertisers to understand their emissions, look for opportunities for reduction, and then importantly to scale that across their business. Could you tell us a little bit more about the work that you do and how the GMSF might impact that?
Sure, thanks, Anthony. So at Impact Plus, we help marketers from brands, agencies, ad techs, publishers to reduce the greenhouse gas emissions of their advertising campaigns. From 2020, we began with digital advertising, And now we are extending our capabilities on different channels, including TV, OOH, DOH. Our approach sits in 3 pillars. The first one is evaluate, then reduce, and then the third is about scaling. When we evaluate the greenhouse gas emissions of advertising, the first step is about data collection. So we created tools that are collecting automatically activity data from campaigns, how many impressions are done, in which context, in which device, on which screen outside, and so on. So this reduces the friction that marketers can have about data collection. From this activity data, we evaluate through our methodology and soon with GMSF the greenhouse gas emissions, and our clients are able to use analytic tool in order to deep dive these numbers. We also permit our clients to ingest these KPIs into their decisioning tools, including reporting or buying algorithms. So they are beginning to use the KPI of greenhouse gas emissions per €1 spent or per 1,000 of euro spent to feed the algorithms in order that these algorithms, on top of attention or viewability, will use these sustainability metrics to optimize campaigns. So that's about the measurement. About the reduction, our tools are identifying levers so that marketers can act rapidly on their campaign. On digital, that can be optimizing the creative or limiting the number of intermediaries, whereas on OOH, that can be working on materials, on papers, on transportation. And the third pillar is about scaling, because working on one single campaign per year, it's okay, it's good, because every single gram counts, but big brands need to scale it on every single campaign. So we help our clients to share and to spread these levers, these good practices that we also are discussing with AdNetZero and IAB Europe amongst countries, amongst media agencies, etc. So about GMSF now. GMSF would be a key change in the industry, and we begin to hear that, and Jay explained that very, very well. Having the same language, the same industry-backed framework will make everyone understand and spend now more time on reducing than on actually understanding difference between methodologies. And we have seen some brands spending more time on thinking about methodology or challenging tools than actually spend much more time on reduction. So this common language amongst agencies, brands, publishers, ad techs, or techs would be key in the future. Because that creates trust, and trust is actually creating speed. This is very important, and for Impact Plus, we see GMSF as a possibility for our clients to accelerate the decarbonization process.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think if we go back to the beginning of why we started the work as well, it was partly due to that variance in measurement. And we were hearing from big advertisers that actually they were working with multiple partners, and actually because the methodology that underpinned the calculation was different, the calculations were different. And so it was very difficult for them to act or to be able to take make any sort of longer term decisions off the back of that. I think also, to your point, Audrey, about the trust part, is I think it was also because there was various methodologies, or there are various methodologies. I think the way that the media industry were being approached, and the supply chain were being approached for data was continually different. And so there was also a lack of trust, I believe, in what was being asked for, in terms of, well, actually, I'm being asked lots of things every week by lots of different people, and it's different, and how am I being measured? So I think there's this sense of, is there a consistent, fair way of measuring the emissions associated to the work that I do? And so I think you're right. I think these hopefully solves or shrinks the variance, at least within the industry, by having one standardized approach. Dimitri, we've talked a lot about data and the provision of data as part of the GMSF and how important that is to be able to get accurate calculations. It plays into what we're saying about sort of this consistency and trust. How do you think the GMSF will help the industry to provide that data?
So Audrey mentioned friction in data collection. That's substantial. And I think the GMSF will kind of ease the data collection process significantly. The reason why that is because now that we have a common language, we have a common set of questions to ask. Going through GMSF version 1.2, stakeholders can now see what kind of data will be requested of them. They can do the internal work required to make that available to their partners that want to estimate their Scope 3 emissions. Beyond that, I think it's also important to note that we're building quite a bit of momentum in the ad ecosystem overall on sustainability, and specifically on the challenge of comparable and equivalent emissions estimates. You know, the AdNetZero community, as well as IAB Europe members, they've dedicated so much time and expertise to this. We're putting everyone in the discussions together and collecting a lot of very useful feedback. We're actually seeing, I think, a lot of pushes inside different companies for disclosure as a result. You know, a lot of our members have recently made figures available specifically for their advertising services, and we hope to see this wave expand to more and more players, and eventually want this to be standard practice across the ecosystem. I'm really grateful that there is an omni-channel approach here with the GMSF overall, and I'm hoping that this wave will spread across all of those 6 channels.
Yeah, thank you. And yes, it's a good point to say that Audrey as part of that group, but Dimitri leading the group for IAB Europe, a lot of your members, including Impact Plus, have dedicated a huge amount of time to this first iteration of the data guidance for digital. And to your point about, you know, talking about sort of developing more and more work, that those working groups continue, don't they? I know over the next year you'll be working with your members to try and build greater understanding, greater detail, greater accuracy into some of those defaults that we're launching today as part of that version 1 of data guidance and version 1.2 of the playbook. Audrey, we see some of the world's largest advertisers leading the way, but building sustainability considerations into their media buying and planning. How do we encourage more advertisers to do the same?
So with Impact Plus, we work since 2020 with major brands, hundreds of major brands, including L'Oréal and Heineken, which are quite leading the way on this topic. Basically what they do now, after a few years of working on greenhouse gas emissions of their media spending, is that they evaluate their emissions at scale, every single campaign that they do. Then they also deploy reduction actions at scale across countries, across media agencies, across media platforms. And they really lead the way on that. But we face some major problems in the industry, and especially since a few months now. One of them is greenwashing. Some brands who are actually doing well are not really communicating about what they do. They are not saying, hey, you know what, I'm doing that, and that works well, and that's not hurting my performances, and media performance test stays stable, whereas I reduce my emissions. Why? Because they think that they are not perfect, or they think that they would be judged for not doing enough. But really change spreads with examples. We need examples to make the industry move. So that's the first problem to tackle together. And so that's why we are here, and that's why we also collaborate a lot with AdNetZero about sharing cases. The second topic that has to be tackled is that marketers should feel confident in the fact that they can reduce emissions without hurting performance, and they can do it at scale, and that's actually easy. That's not difficult, that's easy to make it happen. That's why at Impact Plus we have published recently a guide named Sustainability Simplified, which is a basic step-by-step guide, a checklist, saying, okay, you begin to lay the groundwork, and you do that. And then when you want to evaluate, you can work on your data and then refine it and so on. So that's about education. And then the idea is really to spread the word, to share the message. We see that the tools are existing. We see that pioneers are doing it. We see that creative teams can do their job by reducing the duration of the video. We see that media teams can change their targeting and actually increase performances to get more attention, more viewability by reducing it. So now the industry needs to make it standard and make it normal everywhere.
Thank you. And I think this probably resonates quite a lot with Jay. We were talking about something similar beforehand, actually. But Jay, we know that future regulation is going to affect this, and we know that there'll be more engagement with sustainability as a result of it. But we see that some brands are putting sustainability considerations in their public-facing business strategies. And for you, there's do well by doing good. You know, how does that come to life at MasterCard? And does it start to affect some of your advertising decisions as well?
It does. You know, it is part of our mission and ethos in that, you know, as we go to market, you know, we want to find the most efficient and effective way that also, you know, is best for our consumers, best for our customers, best for the planet. You know, we really believe that, you know, ultimately, you know, we have to ensure that we align the interests of the company with the interests of consumers. And this is a fantastic way to start to do that. And like I said, you know, what we're finding is that, you know, when we are optimizing for carbon reduction, all of our other metrics tend to increase at the same time. And, you know, we've been on this journey now for about 3.5 years. I think, you know, you mentioned some of those stats of, you know, kind of the spectrum of where kind of media sits in terms of overall carbon for the organization. When we went on this journey, you know, kind of the first step is we have to create a baseline. You have to measure, just to understand where we're at. And, you know, our company, we don't have factories, we don't make widgets. So the majority of our carbon actually was coming from carbon and some of our data centers. You know, and then we realized that, you know, there was something that we had to do to be responsible marketers and you know, ultimately how we deployed our marketing resources and what that meant. And so when we first kind of went along this journey, what we realized is the majority of our carbon emissions from media came from digital and digital video, social video in particular. Now, what we realized is that, you know, on one hand, you have carbon coming from digital and social video. On the other hand, when you're doing kind of measurement of, you know, kind of MMM studies and just looking at overall efficiency and effectiveness, it was our most effective channel in terms of ROI. So now you feel like you're at a bit of a crossroads, you know, because ultimately you have to deliver on your business goals, and you want to do that in a way that's also reducing carbon. And so, you know, we had a challenge for the team, you know, and thank goodness we have this group of, you know, and this brain trust that allowed us to go on this exploration and figure out solutions together of how we kind of reconcile something that may have amazingly high ROI, but also amazingly carbon inefficient. So we ended up finding a very elegant solution. We now work with partners like Adobe and compress our media files before we even go out to market and serve them, up to about 90%. And we can do that without any creative degradation. And so now, you know, we're running right now a beautiful messy spot that's mostly done through social video. We're probably going to get a couple billion impressions on that. 2 years ago, that probably would have been 90% of our carbon, just in that one spot, serving it, you know, in 100+ markets around the world for a month. Today, we can compress that file. Instead of it being 125 megs, it could be 2 megs. And now we've saved an unbelievable amount of carbon while at the same time delivering our KPIs. And so I think this is the big aha and insight, is that, you know, you don't have to compromise your ultimate business goals while at the same time reducing carbon.
Thank you, Jay. Thank you all for your brilliant answers. As I say, we've launched the latest version of the GMSF today. At AdNetZero, we hope that one day in the not too distant future, every media plan will have a GHG emission attached to it, which can be considered alongside more established media metrics. But that's not going to be easy, and we are definitely going to need all of your help to achieve that. In the meantime, the development of the GMSF continues. We're going to be developing the data guidance for the remaining 5 channels, hopefully to be released at the end of the year. We'll then be looking at the creation of audit specifications for the tools in the market that are using the GMSF. How can they verify that they're using our formulas in the framework? And then beyond that, we'll be looking at training for the industry, how the industry specific stakeholders can implement and utilize the GMSF for greater adoption across the industry. And if you'd like to learn more about the work that we've done or that we're doing, please check out the website. You can download, as of now, I hope, the latest version of the GMSF. So if you'd like to get involved, please have a look. If you'd like to get involved in the development, please reach out. If you'd like to become an AdNetZero supporter, please contact us through the website. And it just leaves me to say thank you very much to this amazing panel for joining me today, and thank you all for listening.
Thank you.
Thank you.